We have 20 minutes here, so I'm really hoping that you have some awesome questions that you thought about. Feel free to post them onto the track. So far, we've had the pleasure of seeing Bolt in action with Mr. Scoresbill over here talking about how to dissect log entries and how to get more out of it, and what we're looking at for the future with Elastic. So, you have any questions? Søren is right here. We have Espen over here, who gave you a nice look at Condo and sort of the deep specifics about how we're actually doing things. I think the cool thing about what Espen had to say is basically that, because of the care of how we design the components, which is basically the way we've always done things, we are able to reuse them ourselves, but also you're actually able to reuse them once the extensibility for Condo becomes available to you. So I think there's something really cool there for the future. And then finally, Mr. Skirley, right there, Mr. Customer Success. I think it is a new API. It is a whole new world. So of course, porting from V8 to V9 is going to require code changes. However, I think we found that it's not so arduous to make that transition as we were initially fearing. So feel free to type your questions in chat, and we have David online to curate those questions in case you, for anything you need.
Or if you prefer to speak your questions, that would be fine too. We just need to unmute you some way. Oh, that's a...
Okay, so there is a question from Alice. Hi, Alice, actually a former colleague of ours. Good to see you online. Alice asks, what is the ETA on Elasticsearch? So actually, that's probably better that you provide an answer for that. Can you speak into the microphone?
I certainly can. ETA is yet to be decided. I'm sorry, I know many of you are really looking forward to this feature. We do realize that some of you are even pressed for time, but we want to make it right more than anything. We're not going to ship anything before it's ready, but it's scheduled for the last quarter of this year. That is all I can say. I wish I could say more, but we will keep you updated on a more regular basis. Is that okay?
What we do is just to give you a sense of how we're prioritizing here. We are basically sort of all hands on deck for the Elastic provider. As you saw in Søren's presentation, we are redoing some of the syntax to make it a little easier to define indexes and things like that. And we're also reworking some of the architecture to make it easier to rebuild, or not rebuild, but build a new provider, right? So if you want something like Azure Search or something like that, you can do that. All right. So from Anthony Halliday, thank you for your question. With Bolt, is there any built-in support for mapping to strongly typed models for product properties, etc.?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I could have asked it myself. Yes, there is. And when you say a strongly typed model, I assume you mean the model that you want to get out of Bolt from the index, that you can shape it in a way that fits the web, the e-commerce site 100%. And yes, you can certainly create your own type, or you can inherit from our baseline types and add all the strongly typed properties. There's certainly some limitations because a search engine like Lucene has a few types that it understands really well, but not everything in the .NET space is translatable. So if it's strings or simple types, dictionaries of strings and strings or numeric types, or if it's a list of strings or other simple types, you can certainly create and use your own strongly typed models for it.
Perfect. And I can add to that we early in the design process of Bolt, this was the first version we were looking at the end of the year. We were also looking at supporting the notion of polymorphic models. So basically today there is one type safe model you can work with to get return from Bolt. In the future, we're hoping, this is not on the roadmap at the moment, but we're hoping to support polymorphic models. So you could have the notion of a a product model and then an inherited shirt model, for example. So you would get back, the actual concrete instance of the type you choose. But that's a little farther out, but it's definitely something that will make it much more. It will support some pretty interesting scenarios for products and for the definition system itself, where we do have the notion of inheritance as well. So I hope that makes sense. Tim Gaunt asks, "Hi Tim, what's the plan for apps going forward?" I guess I can feel this one. So the plan for apps is so apps are there, like they've been for a long time. The whole app platform sits at the core of Ucommerce. It's what enables us to do all the awesome things that, or not us, you rather. So the plan is to, right now, it's limited compared to what it was before, primarily for Condo. So the extensibility bits that Esben discussed, they will be packaged as apps like before. So the idea is basically to transition from the old UIs that we've been supporting for many years now through apps to the Condo-based stack. The reason we didn't do apps to begin with was basically to try and keep the complexity of the project as low as possible. So we didn't try and overreach and overextend. We've had a few false starts on the new UI stack. I think Morten Skjold can attest to that. Actually, he did awesome work, but it was just huge undertaking to A, build a completely new UI, and B, build it in an extensible way. It turns out it's not so easy. No. So now we're building the new UIs and then the extensibility as we go. So that's the plan for apps. We're going to keep them around as part of the platform, of course, because it's such a powerful notion. It's such a convenient way to work, and we're going to build support for Condo right into the apps, so you can build the best of both worlds there. Good. I hope that answers the question. Here's another one from Tim. So Tim asks, "What's the plan for personalization and tracking and building personas?" So this is an interesting question from a sort of a content and commerce perspective. Because basically we don't see this as part of Ucommerce job to do personalization and tracking. So when we partner with a CMS like Sitecore or Sitefinity, our goal is to basically integrate with the capabilities those CMSs support. So for those, we basically try and hook into the capabilities of what's there. So for Sitecore, we are integrated with the personalization features of Sitecore. For Sitefinity, we're not quite so far along in the integration process. Personalization is available out of the box with Sitefinity for content, but we haven't added any commerce personalization at this point. But we're definitely going to take a look at it. For just way down the line. For personalization on Umbraco, actually, this is my favorite way of doing a personalization from an e-commerce perspective, because the challenge with personalization in Sitefinity and Sitecore is that it requires a lot of hand-holding to get done. So you need to go into individual products and content and things like that and say what it means if a customer visits this or that to score them against the user profile. The challenge, of course, is that if you're dealing with I think the product catalog you mentioned we were testing with is around, what is it? 500,000 SKUs?
500,000.
500,000, yeah. So 500,000 SKUs, so going in and hand-holding that for personalization, you'll be dead before you're done, basically, and then all your products will change, and then you'll be dead all over again, right? So it's not really going to work. Sorry about the dark pun there. So my favorite is basically to integrate with a algorithm-based service, right? And there are tons of them out there. We partner with a Danish company called Raptor, which is basically just an algorithmic approach to recommendation. So you feed it in the identifiers of the products, and an identifier of a customer looking at those products, and is able to create those recommendation clouds via their SaaS service. So I think that's probably the best way to go from an e-commerce perspective, because I wouldn't say it runs itself, but it does a lot of the magic on its own. So I hope that makes sense from a personalization perspective. So just Sitecore, Sitefinity has some stuff for content. Some of that can be used for e-commerce, but if you really want to make it go, use a recommendation engine on the interwebs. Another question here: are there any customer management capabilities on the roadmap? So so there's not in the roadmap that I showed in the initial talk. But there is actually, this is something I wanted to show you if we didn't get enough questions, so I can talk about it a little bit now. Before anything makes it onto the roadmap, basically we run it through that user scoring process where the product team looks at all the feedback we get and we assign a user score to it. And so that happens prior to anything getting onto the roadmap. So customer management is part of that. So the pre-roadmap, if you will. So we're basically just waiting for feedback, additional feedback to push it up. The challenge right now from a product management perspective is that we have a lot of existing capabilities within the platform that needs to be ported to the Condo stack. So we're completing the product stuff that's being wrapped up in this milestone, basically. And then we need to proceed to extensibility, which Esben talked about, and then on to promotions and order management. But after that, the things start clearing up. And there is a key thing that I thought about as I was listening to these wonderful people's presentation, and that's the roadmap, such as I laid it out, has been laid out with an assumption of us being at the same level of capacity as we are now on the product team. But just from last year till now, we have, doubled the product team, something like that. So we're going faster, right? And the goal is definitely to keep growing the product team, as Hanno mentioned, to make sure that we can increase velocity. Because one thing are all the e-commerce related capabilities that we need to build, such as customer management. Another is that move over time towards the cloud and towards .NET Core. We need to do that as well at the same time as we're porting to Condo, basically. Interestingly enough, the Condo port is also part of the move towards .NET Core, because the key there is basically get rid of all the stuff that's unsupported in .NET, like, web forms, made rest in peace. So yeah, that's the thing. All right, I think that's the longest answer ever. Do you have any other questions we can entertain you with? Anything that struck your fancy in the UI department maybe, or on the customer success side of things? All right. Good. So I think this is probably one for you.
Yes. Thank you. So the question is, what is the best place to see guidance on how to adapt to specific breaking changes coming in V9? We of course do release notes that will state breaking changes, but as part of the customer success team, we also try to document every breaking change that we do have in the platform. I didn't get to talk about it in my presentation, but one of the cool things that we have been working on the documentation is actually the ability to compile the documentation, so to speak, or not so to speak. We actually do compile the documentation. So all code snippets that you see on V9 and going forward is actually code pieces that has been compiled, so we know that it fits for that version of the platform. So whenever we miss breaking changes, we will at least see them in the documentation. So all code pieces you see there should be up to date, and we want to do breaking changes articles on very specific things that requires your attention. And also we do that for migration from 8 to 9 as well. So it should be on the doc side, and if it's not, then we need to fix it. Yeah.
Good, and maybe Søren, you could add a note on how we're doing documentation for Elastic, because it's a little bit of a different process than what we've done before, from building the docs initially and then actually building the Elastic provider after that. Can you speak a little to that?
Well, I can say that another form of documentation is unit tests and integration tests. So testing is very much in a shape where you can take each of the tests and either put them in documentation, or you could look at them as documentation. And when it becomes publicly available, I think it will provide you some guidance in addition to what Morten mentioned. And we also know when we do breaking changes, and we are going to make sure that the documents come out with the breaking changes. or even sometimes in advance.
Perfect, thank you. And from a testing perspective, maybe it would make sense to talk a little bit about UI testing as well. Is that something, it's not new anymore, but it's probably something not everybody knows that we're doing?
No, yeah, we are doing unit testing of, as I actually mentioned earlier during my presentation, of all the components in our UI library. Next to that, we are also doing integration tests. So, we have some. The entire suite is not done yet, but it basically means that we know whether or not something will break in production if we manage to mess up a component and the unit tests pass, but the integration test will fail. So we're personally becoming more and more confident in what we're publishing. And our test coverage is pretty good at the moment. I don't remember the exact number right now, but it's looking good, and it's looking better every day.
Somewhere under 100.
Somewhere around 100. I can guarantee that. Yes.
And I think I know the question wasn't specifically about tests, but now that we got into it, something cool just occurred to me. So whenever a new version of Umbraco gets released, Soren here has actually done some pretty amazing work to enable us to test that. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, we've applied virtualization to some of our processes so that it will be easier for us to spin up newer versions of, to be honest, mostly Umbraco, because it's the one that most readily is installable by scripting. But we're automating parts of our work process, and therefore we can faster than ever before tell whether the new versions of the CMSs are compatible. So that's also a shape of breaking changes not originating from us, but due to the fact that we have limited capacity, as any company does, and there are lots of different combinations of our versions and Sitefinity versions, major and minor and patches, plus Umbraco versions. They come out quite rapidly these days, and then of course Sitecore as well. So we're investing in our own infrastructure to enable us to catch these breaking changes coming from the outside, unintentionally, but coming from the outside still.
So that may have been the longest reply to a test, a breaking changes question. But Soren was actually able to test Umbraco 8.7 like minutes after it was released, and the same thing with 8.8. So kind of cool. And with that, we have to wrap it up. We have seen the paddle of doom from Anders over there behind the scenes. So thank you very much for your awesome questions, and thank you for sticking with us throughout the day. We will merge this track back to the main track. So I believe David is online in the chat. He will post a link for you to go to so you can rejoin the main webinar track. Thank you very much.